Counselor Velthar walked into the great meeting hall like she did every morning. The tall alien had blue skin and 4 arms, and she had been working for the Galactic Council for over 50 years. Today felt different, but she could not say why. She sat down at her desk and opened the daily reports. Each morning, hundreds of messages came in from all across the galaxy. Most were boring things like trade numbers and crime reports. But today, something caught her eye. The human colonies were quiet. Too quiet. Velthar frowned and looked closer. New Sol Colony had not sent any messages for 3 days. New Busan was the same. In fact, 17 different human worlds had gone completely silent. No distress calls, no requests for help, nothing at all. This was strange. Humans always talked too much, in Velthar's opinion. They sent reports about everything. If a human child lost a tooth, they would probably file a form about it. So why were they all quiet now? She tried to call Ambassador Hyun-woo, the human representative on the council. His office computer said he was not available. It had said the same thing for 3 weeks now. Velthar realized she had not seen any humans in the council building lately. Down in the communications center, Ji-won was packing her things. The young human woman had worked there for 5 years. She was good at her job and never caused trouble. Her alien co-workers watched her put her belongings into a small bag. "Where are you going?" asked Zetko, a green-skinned alien who sat next to her. "Home," Ji-won said simply. She did not look sad or angry. She just looked calm. "But this is your home now," Zetko said. "You have been here for years. Your apartment, your friends, your life is here." Ji-won smiled a small smile. "No, this was never home. I am going to my real home now." She finished packing and walked toward the door. At the exit, she turned and looked back at her co-workers. "Take care of yourselves," she said. Then she was gone. Zetko went to check Ji-won's apartment later that day. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was clean and empty. The walls were bare, the closets were empty, and the refrigerator was turned off. It looked like no one had ever lived there at all. On the other side of the galaxy, Tae-min stood on a tall building and looked up at the sky. Above his city, enormous ships hung in the air without making any sound. They were bigger than anything the Galactic Council had ever built, but they moved like they weighed nothing at all. Tae-min was in charge of organizing the departure from New Busan Colony. He had been planning this for months, but the other species in the galaxy did not know that. Everything had to be done quietly and carefully. Families walked calmly toward the loading areas. Parents carried small children, while older kids held hands and stayed close. Everyone had 1 bag each. They left behind houses, cars, pets, and most of their belongings, but no one complained or cried. "Are you sure about this?" asked In-ho, Tae-min's assistant. "We built good lives here. The soil is rich, the weather is nice, and we have friends among the other species." Tae-min nodded slowly. "We built good lives, yes. But our children deserve better than just good lives. They deserve to grow up somewhere they are truly valued." The ships above them were completely silent. They used technology that the Galactic Council could not understand or detect. No energy readings, no heat signatures, no quantum disturbances. To the Council's sensors, the ships might as well have been ghosts. Inside one of the ships, Sohee sat with her daughter Mina. The little girl pressed her face against the window and watched the city below getting smaller. "Will we see our friends again?" Mina asked. Sohee thought about this carefully. How could she explain to a child that their friends had never really seen them as equals? How could she tell her daughter that no matter how hard humans tried, they would always be seen as the junior species in the galaxy? "Maybe someday," Sohee said, "but we are going to build something new now, something better." On the planet's surface, the human cities continued to function normally. The lights stayed on, the computers kept working, and the automated systems ran perfectly. From far away, it looked like everything was normal, but there were no people left to see it. Back at the council building, Velthar tried to contact human colonies directly. She called New Sol first. The communication system connected, but no one answered. She could see the city through the video link. The streets were empty, but nothing looked broken or damaged. She tried New Busan next. Same thing. The city was there, the buildings were fine, but no humans could be seen anywhere. It was like watching a movie set after all the actors had gone home. Velthar felt a strange feeling in her stomach. She had always thought humans were too emotional and too soft for real galactic politics. They spent too much time talking about feelings and not enough time on practical matters. But now that they were gone, something felt wrong. She walked to Ambassador Hyunwoo's office. The door was not locked. Inside, his desk was clean and empty. His personal belongings were gone, but he had left behind all his official papers and reports. Everything was organized perfectly, as if he wanted to make sure the council could continue its work without any problems. On his desk was a small note written in simple galactic standard language. "Thank you for the opportunity to serve. Humanity wishes the council well in all future endeavors." That was all. No anger, no complaints, no demands. Just a polite goodbye. Velthar sat down in Hyunwoo's chair and looked out the window. In the distance, she could see the docking bay where human ships usually landed. It was empty now. She realized she could not remember the last time she had seen a human ship arrive or leave. How long had they been planning this? How had they organized such a massive operation without anyone noticing? And most importantly, why had they left? Without saying anything? She thought about the humans she had worked with over the years. They had always been helpful and polite. They shared their technology freely and never asked for much in return. They worked hard to solve problems and always tried to find peaceful solutions to conflicts. But Velthar had to admit, she had never really paid much attention to them. Humans were just there. They did their jobs and followed the rules. They were not exciting like the warrior Dravik or mysterious like the ancient Vorthak. They were ordinary. Now they were gone. And Velthar was beginning to realize that ordinary might have been more important than she thought. In the vast emptiness of space, the human ships moved away from the galaxy like seeds on the wind. They left behind no trail and made no sound. They simply disappeared into the darkness between the stars, carrying with them secrets that the Galactic Council was only beginning to understand it had lost. The emergency meeting room was full of angry voices. Councillor Velthar sat at the head of the long table, looking at the representatives from dozens of different species. The Kalari had silver skin and spoke in musical tones. The Vorthak were old and wise, with wrinkled faces and slow movements. The Dravek were tall and strong, built for war. "This is clearly a primitive reaction," said Councillor Kethvos, the Dravek military leader. His red skin was covered in scars from many battles. "Humans have always been too emotional. They probably got upset about something small and decided to throw a tantrum." The other council members nodded in agreement. Several made sounds that meant laughter in their languages. "They will be back," said Elder Morthek of the Vorthak. "Young species often do foolish things. In a few cycles, when their food runs out and their ships break down, they will come crawling back asking for help." Velthar looked around the room. She had called this emergency meeting to discuss humanity's disappearance, but most of the council members did not seem worried at all. In fact, many seemed happy about it. "Perhaps we should consider why they left," Velthar said carefully. "Did we do something to offend them?" The room grew quiet for a moment. Then Councillor Zelnara of the Kalari made a sound like wind chimes. "Offend them? We gave them everything. We let them join the council even though they were barely out of their home system. We shared our technology and our knowledge. What more could they want?" "Respect," said a quiet voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look. He, the last human diplomat on the station, stood near the door. She was small compared to most of the aliens in the room, with black hair and dark eyes. She wore the simple blue uniform of the diplomatic corps. "Excuse me?" Kethvos said, his voice full of anger. "What did you say?" "I said respect." He repeated, walking into the room. "For 300 years, humanity has served on this council. We have shared our technology, our knowledge, and our resources. We have helped solve conflicts and prevented wars. But we have never been treated as equals." The council members looked at each other with surprise. They were not used to being criticized, especially not by humans. "That is not true," Elder Morthek said slowly. "Humans have been valuable members of the council. Your contributions have been appreciated. So he smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Appreciated. Yes, that is exactly the problem. When the Kalari invented faster-than-light communication, you called them brilliant. When the Vorthak discovered quantum manipulation, you called them wise. When humans cure diseases or solve food shortages, you call us appreciated. Your species is young, Zelnara said, her musical voice turning sharp. You have not earned the respect that comes with age and experience. We are young, yes, so he agreed, but we have spent those 300 years proving ourselves over and over again. How many wars have we prevented? How many famines have we ended? How many plagues have we cured? And still, we are just the junior members who should be grateful for the chance to serve. Kethevos slammed his large hand on the table. Enough! This is exactly the kind of emotional thinking that proves humans are not ready for real responsibility. You think you deserve respect just for doing your jobs? So he looked at him calmly. No. We thought we could earn respect by doing our jobs. Well, we were wrong. The room erupted in angry voices. Council members spoke over each other in a dozen different languages. Some accused Sohee of being ungrateful. Others said humans had always been troublemakers. A few suggested that humanity leaving was the best thing that could have happened. Through all the noise, Sohee stood quietly and waited. When the room finally grew quiet again, she spoke. I have been authorized to make one final offer, she said. Humanity is willing to return to Council space and resume our duties. All we ask is for one thing, a vote. A real vote, with real power on Council decisions. The silence that followed was complete. Then Elder Morthek began to laugh. It was a dry, crackling sound like old leaves. A vote, he said. Equal representation? You are a single species that has existed for barely a moment in galactic time. We have civilizations here that were building starships when your ancestors were still living in caves. And yet, so he said quietly, we are the ones you call. When there are problems to solve. Kethvo stood up, his massive frame towering over Sohee. Problems? What problems? The galaxy was peaceful before humans arrived, and it will be peaceful after you leave. So, he nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose you will find out if that is true. She turned to leave, but Velthar called after her. Wait, what if we could arrange some kind of compromise? Perhaps expanded representation or advisory status with limited voting rights? So he stopped and looked back. For a moment, Velthar thought she saw sadness in the human's eyes. 300 years ago, that might have been enough, so he said. But our children deserve better than compromises and limited rights. They deserve to grow up in a place where their worth is not questioned every day. Where will you go? Velthar asked. Somewhere we can build something worthy of them. Sohee replied. After Sohee left, the council meeting continued for several more hours. The discussion quickly turned from humanity's departure to more practical matters. How should they divide up the empty human territories? Which species should get access to abandoned human research facilities? Who would take over the trade routes that humans had managed? Kethvos was particularly excited about the military possibilities. Human space has some of the best defensive positions in the galaxy, he said. With proper fortification, we could control 3 major shipping lanes. The research facilities are more valuable, argued Dr. Yelkora of the Kalari. Humans may be primitive, but they did have some interesting ideas about medicine and agriculture. We should study their methods before other species claim everything. Elder Morthek was more interested in the political implications. This could be an opportunity to restructure the council, he said. Remove some of the smaller, less important species and focus on those with real power and influence. Throughout all of this, Velthar said very little. She kept thinking about Sohee's words. You never understood what you were dealing with. What had they been dealing with? Humans seemed so ordinary. They were not the strongest or the smartest or the oldest species in the galaxy. They were just reliable. When there was a problem, humans would volunteer to help. When there was a conflict, humans would offer to mediate. When there was suffering, humans would share whatever they had. But that was just what junior species were supposed to do, wasn't it? The older, more advanced civilizations made the important decisions, and the younger species helped carry them out. That was how the galaxy had always worked. The meeting finally ended near midnight, station time. The council members filed out, already making plans for claiming human territory. Only Velthar remained, sitting alone in the empty room. She thought about all the times humans had volunteered for dangerous missions. They had been the first to explore unknown regions of space, the first to make contact with hostile species, the first to volunteer when the council needed someone to take risks. She thought about the human research teams who had worked for decades to solve galactic food shortages. They had shared their discoveries freely, never asking for patents or exclusive rights. She thought about the human diplomats who had spent their careers traveling to conflict zones, often risking their lives to prevent wars between species who barely tolerated each other. Had the council ever thanked them? Really thanked them, not just with polite words, but with real recognition and respect? Velthar realized she could not remember a single time. The next morning, Sohi's ship departed from the council station. It was a small vessel, designed for long-distance travel. Velthar watched from her office window as it disappeared into the darkness of space. In the distance, she could see the lights of other ships. Human vessels, all moving away from council space like a slow river of stars. They made no sound and left no trail. They simply faded into the vast emptiness, taking with them secrets that the galaxy was only beginning to realize it had lost. For the first time in 50 years of council service, Velthar felt afraid. 3 months passed since the humans left. At first, everything seemed normal. The galaxy continued to function just as it always had. Trade ships moved between worlds, the council held its regular meetings, and life went on. Then Dr. Yelcora made her first discovery. The Kalari scientist had been eager to examine the medical facilities that humans had left behind on New Sol Colony. For years, she had watched human doctors perform what seemed like miracles. They could cure cancers that killed millions of other species. They could heal genetic diseases that the galaxy's best minds could not understand. Dr. Yelcora landed on New Sol with a team of the finest Kalari medical researchers. The human hospitals were still running on automatic power. The equipment looked exactly the same as it had when humans operated it. Everything should have worked perfectly, but when they tried to use the cancer treatment machines, something was wrong. The devices turned on and made the right sounds, but they did not work like before. A treatment that once took an hour and cured the disease completely now took 6 hours, and only helped a little. Maybe we are using them wrong, said Dr. Velmira, Yelcora's assistant. She was young and still believed that every problem had a simple solution. Dr. Yelcora was not so sure. She had watched human doctors use these same machines many times. The procedure looked simple enough. Put the patient in the chamber, adjust the settings, and let the machine do its work. But when the Kalari tried to do exactly the same thing, the results were completely different. She began to study the human medical records more carefully. The files were all there, written in perfect galactic standard language. Every procedure was documented, every setting was recorded, every technique was explained in detail, but the more she read, the more confused she became. The humans wrote about things like patient intuition and feeling the disease's weakness. They talked about listening to the body's needs and understanding the harmony of healing. Dr. Yelcora had always thought this was just human poetry. Her species believed in science, in measurements and calculations and precise procedures. But now she was beginning to wonder if those strange human words had actually meant something important. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Vorthak were having their own problems. Elder Torvek stood in the middle of what had once been a human farm on the colony world of New Jeju. The fields stretched out in all directions, rich and green and beautiful. The human farmers had grown enough food here to feed 12 worlds. The Vorthak had taken over the farms, expecting to continue the same level of production. Instead, their first harvest was terrible. The plants grew, but they were weak and small. The fruits were bitter, and many of the vegetables rotted before they could be picked. The soil was the same, the seeds were the same, the machines were the same, but somehow everything was different. "We must be missing something," Elder Torvek said to his agricultural specialists. Humans are primitive. If they could make these farms work, then we certainly can. The Vorthak scientists ran tests on everything. They measured the soil composition down to the smallest particle. They analyzed the water, the air, the amount of sunlight. They studied the human machines and tried to copy their exact procedures. But nothing worked. No matter what they did, the farms produced less and less food each month. Elder Torvek found a human research station near the largest farm. Inside, he discovered hundreds of documents written by a human scientist named Wu Jin. The papers described farming techniques that sounded like nonsense to Vorthak minds. Wu Jin wrote about talking to the plants and feeling the soil's mood. He described how different fields needed different kinds of attention and how a farmer had to understand the land's personality to grow the best crops. The Vorthak had dismissed such ideas as primitive superstition. They believed in scientific farming, exact measurements, precise timing, and perfect control. But now, standing in fields that grew weaker every day, Elder Torvek was beginning to question everything he thought he knew. The problems were not limited to medicine and farming. Across the galaxy, systems that had worked perfectly for decades were beginning to fail. On the trade station at Nexus Point, Station Master Gralco watched his cargo handling efficiency drop by 30%. For years, human workers had managed the complex logistics of moving goods between dozens of different species. They had somehow made it look easy. Now, without humans to coordinate the work, everything was chaos. Ships waited for days to be unloaded. Cargo got sent to the wrong destinations. Food shipments spoiled in storage while the paperwork was being sorted out. Gralco hired the best logistics experts from 6 different species. They studied the human procedures and tried to follow them. Exactly, but something was always wrong. The smooth flow of goods that humans had maintained was gone, replaced by confusion and delays. The worst problems came in the council chambers themselves. For the first time in decades, heated arguments were breaking out between different species. The Dravek were angry about shipping delays affecting their military supplies. The Kalari were frustrated by the medical equipment failures. The Vorthak were worried about food shortages. Councillor Velthar found herself spending more and more time trying to prevent fights between council members. She had never realized how much time humans had spent quietly smoothing over disagreements and finding compromises that everyone could accept. She remembered Ambassador Hyunwoo's gentle voice, asking careful questions that somehow helped opposing sides find common ground. She thought about the human mediators who had been present at every major negotiation for the past century. They never said much, but somehow their presence had made everything work better. Now they were gone, and the council was falling apart. The breaking point came during a trade dispute between the Kalari and the Dravek. The argument was about shipping, routes, and taxation, the kind of boring issue that the council dealt with every week. But without human mediators to help find a middle ground, the discussion quickly became personal. Councillor Kethvos accused the Kalari of cheating on their trade agreements. Dr. Yelkora responded by calling the Dravek too stupid to understand. Basic economics. Within minutes, both sides were shouting insults across the chamber. Velthar tried to restore order, but she did not have the human gift for calming angry voices with just the right words. The argument continued for hours, growing worse and worse, until finally both sides stormed out of the chamber without reaching any agreement. That night, Velthar sat in her office and tried to understand what was happening. The galaxy had not changed. The same species lived on the same worlds, worked the same jobs, and faced the same challenges they always had. The only difference was that humans were gone. But somehow that one difference was changing everything. She began to read through old council records, looking for patterns. What she found disturbed her. For the past 3 centuries, humans had been involved in almost every major peace negotiation. They had helped design most of the trade agreements that kept the galaxy's economy running. They had contributed to nearly every scientific breakthrough that had improved life for billions of beings. But their contributions had been so quiet and humble that most species had barely noticed them. Humans never demanded credit or recognition. They just did the work and let others take the praise. Now that work was not getting done, and the galaxy was beginning to fall apart. Velthar tried to contact the human ships, but they were too far away now. Even if they could hear her messages, she was not sure what she would say. "Please come back, we need you." "We are sorry for treating you badly. We did not realize how important you were." All of those things were true, but none of them seemed enough. Outside her window, she could see the lights of ships from dozens of different worlds. They came to the council station seeking help with problems that were getting worse every day. Medical crises, food shortages, trade disputes, and conflicts that had been prevented for so long that most species had forgotten they could happen. For 300 years, humans had been the quiet foundation that held galactic civilization together. Now that foundation was gone and everything built on top of it was starting to crumble. The worst part was that Velthar knew this was only the beginning. If these small problems could not be solved, they would grow into bigger problems, and bigger problems would grow into wars. She thought about Sohi's last words. You never understood what you were dealing with. Now, finally, Velthar was beginning to understand. But it might already be too late. 1 year had passed since humanity left, and the galaxy was dying. Dr. Yelcora stood in her laboratory on Kalari Prime, staring at the data screens with growing horror. The plague had started 3 weeks ago as a simple respiratory infection. In the old days, this would have been easy to stop. Human doctors had dealt with similar outbreaks dozens of times. But the human doctors were gone, and Dr. Yelcora could not figure out how they had made it look so easy. She had all their medical records. She had studied their procedures for months. She had the same equipment they had used. But when she tried to apply their methods, nothing worked the way it should. The plague spread from city to city, jumping between different species in ways that defied all known medical science. Dr. Yelcora's treatments helped some patients, but others got worse. The disease seemed to change every time she thought she understood it. In desperation, she called Dr. Namgil, the Vorthak's top medical researcher. Perhaps working together, they could solve what neither could fix alone. Have you tried the human antiviral protocols? Dr. Namgil asked through the communication screen. His ancient face looked tired and worried. I have tried everything, Dr. Yelcora replied. The protocols work sometimes, but not always. It is like the humans knew something that they never wrote down. Dr. Namgil nodded slowly. I have been reading the research papers left by a human scientist named Mijung. She wrote about something called intuitive medicine. I thought it was just human poetry, but now I am not so sure. Mijung's papers were full of strange ideas. She wrote about understanding diseases as living things with personalities and moods. She described how different patients needed different approaches, even when they had the same illness. She talked about feeling the right treatment rather than calculating it. To scientific minds trained in logic and precision, these ideas sounded like magic. But as the plague continued to spread, Dr. Yelcora was beginning to think that magic might be exactly what they needed. Meanwhile, the Dravek Empire was collapsing from within. General Kethvos stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his mighty war fleet struggle with equipment failures. For decades, Dravek weapons had been enhanced with human technology. The humans had made their ships faster, their guns more accurate, and their defenses stronger. Now those enhancements were failing one by one. Engineering report, Kethvos commanded. The targeting systems are operating at 60% efficiency, his chief engineer replied. The shield generators are unstable and the propulsion system keeps overheating. Kethvos slammed his fist on the command console. These are the same systems that worked perfectly last year. What has changed? But he already knew the answer. The humans were gone, and their technology was dying with them. The Dravek had captured several human engineers during border conflicts over the years. They had forced the humans to explain their technology and share their secrets. The humans had complied, answering every question and providing detailed technical manuals. But now, Kethvos realized that the humans had only shared part of the truth. Their technology was not just about circuits and equations. It required something else, something that could not be forced out of prisoners or written down in manuals. His science officers had studied human engineering for months, trying to understand what they were missing. The human designs were incredibly complex, but also strangely elegant. Where other species used brute force solutions, humans found ways to make different systems work together in harmony. A Dravek engineer named Gorthek had spent his entire career trying to copy human weapon designs. He had finally admitted defeat. The previous week. "It is not just engineering," Gorthek had told Kethvos. "The humans built their machines like they were creating art. Every part fits with every other part in ways that our mathematics cannot describe. We can copy the individual pieces, but we cannot copy the way they work together." The collapse was not limited to technology. The galaxy's political structure was falling apart as well. The ancient Vorthak Concordat had maintained peace between dozens of species for over 2,000 years. It was the oldest and most respected treaty in galactic history. But now, for the first time since its creation, the Concordat was breaking down. Elder Morthek sat in his council chamber, reading reports of border conflicts and trade wars that were spreading across Vorthak space. Species that had been allies for centuries were suddenly fighting over resources and territory. The problem was not just the conflicts themselves. The real problem was that no one could stop them. For hundreds of years, human diplomats had served as neutral mediators whenever the Concordat was threatened. They had a gift for understanding different species and finding solutions that everyone could accept. They never took sides, never demanded payment, and never claimed credit for their successes. Elder Morthek had always thought human diplomacy was simple and primitive. They talked too much about feelings and not enough about facts. They made decisions based on emotion rather than logic. But now he was beginning to understand that human emotions had been exactly what galactic diplomacy needed. He found a research paper written by a human diplomat named Dong Ho. The paper was titled "Understanding the Heart of Conflict," and it described how most wars began not with logical disagreements, but with hurt feelings and wounded pride. Dong Ho wrote about the importance of making all sides feel heard and respected. He explained how small gestures of understanding could prevent huge disasters. He described diplomacy not as a game of winning and losing, but as a process of healing relationships between different peoples. The paper had been filed away and forgotten when it was first written. Elder Morthek had probably read it years ago and dismissed it as human weakness. Now, as his civilization crumbled around him, every word seemed like prophecy. The worst crisis came when the Rim Wars began. The Outer Rim had always been a dangerous place. Dozens of small species lived on marginal worlds, competing for limited resources. For decades, human peacekeepers had maintained stability in the region through a combination of aid programs, trade agreements, and careful diplomacy. Now, the humans were gone, and the Rim was exploding into violence. Counselor Velthar received reports of battles between species she had never heard of. Worlds were being destroyed over disputes that seemed impossibly small. An argument about mining rights had escalated into a war that was killing millions. She tried to send council peacekeepers to restore order, but they failed completely. The Kalari forces were too focused on precision and rules to understand the chaotic nature of Rim conflicts. The Dravek forces were too aggressive, turning small fights into bigger wars. The Vorthak forces were too slow and cautious to respond to rapidly changing situations. Only humans had possessed the right combination of flexibility, empathy, and determination to keep the peace in such a difficult region. Velthar found a human peacekeeping manual in the abandoned council archives. It was written by a commander named Eunji, who had served in the Rim for 30 years. The manual was unlike any military document Velthar had ever read. Instead of focusing on weapons and tactics, Eunji wrote about understanding local cultures and building trust with different communities. She described how human peacekeepers learned the languages, customs, and histories of dozens of different species. They did not impose peace through force, but helped different groups find ways to live together. Peace is not the absence of conflict, Eunji had written. Peace is the presence of understanding. The manual contained detailed profiles of every major species in the Rim. Each profile included not just military and political information, but cultural insights that explained how each species thought and felt about conflict. It was like a guidebook for preventing wars that had been written by someone who truly cared about the people she was trying to protect. As Velthar read through the manual, she realized the terrible truth. Humans had not just been participants in galactic civilization, they had been its guardians, quietly preventing disasters that other species did not even know were possible. For 3 centuries, humans had served as doctors, engineers, diplomats, peacekeepers, and mediators. They had shared their knowledge freely and asked for nothing in return except the chance to build a better galaxy for everyone, and the galaxy had repaid them with condescension, dismissal, and disrespect. Now, as wars raged across dozens of worlds, and ancient alliances crumbled into dust, Velthar finally understood what he had tried to tell them. The humans had not been the junior species seeking acceptance. They had been the teachers, patiently waiting for their students to learn. But the lesson had been too difficult, and the students too proud to listen. Now the teachers were gone, and the classroom was burning down. Velthar tried one last time to contact the human fleet, but her messages disappeared into the empty darkness between stars. Even if the humans could hear her, she was not sure they would care anymore. The galaxy had chosen its path when it chose pride over wisdom, tradition over change, and power over compassion. Now it would have to live with the consequences of that choice. 5 years had passed since humanity left, and the galaxy was a graveyard of broken dreams. Counselor Velthar walked through the ruins of the council station. Half the lights were dark now. Most of the alien species had stopped sending representatives months ago. There was no point in holding meetings when every discussion ended in shouting matches and threats of war. The great civilization that had lasted for thousands of years was dead. In its place, dozens of small empires fought over the pieces like scavengers picking at bones. Velthar made her way to what had once been the council archives. The massive library contained the collected knowledge of hundreds of species spanning millions of years, but now the halls were empty, and many of the data storage units had been damaged in the fighting. She was looking for something specific. During the chaos of the last few years, she had remembered glimpses of conversations with humans, small moments that had seemed unimportant at the time. Now she wondered if those moments held the key to understanding what had really happened. In a forgotten corner of the archives, she found what she was looking for: humanity's final gift to the galaxy. The files were labeled simply, "In case you ever wondered why we stayed so long?" Velthar's hands shook as she opened the first document. It was a complete record of every crisis that humans had quietly prevented over the past 3 centuries. Wars that never started because human diplomats found peaceful solutions. Plagues that never spread because human doctors acted quickly. Famines that never happened because human engineers shared their agricultural knowledge. The list went on for thousands of pages. The Kalari-Dravek resource conflict of 23A7, prevented by human mediator Jin Ho, who spent 6 months helping both sides understand their real needs. The Vorthak succession crisis of 2401, resolved by human counselor Bo Ram, who suggested a power-sharing agreement that satisfied all parties. The Rim plague of 2419, contained by a human medical team led by Dr. Su Min, who developed a treatment protocol in record time. The asteroid mining dispute of 2435, settled by human engineer Yu Jin, who designed a sharing system that increased profits for all involved parties. Each entry included detailed reports explaining not just what humans had done, but how they had done it. The files revealed the careful thought and planning that went into every human action. They showed how humans had studied each species, learned their cultures, and found ways to solve problems that played to everyone's strengths. But the most shocking revelation was the scope of human involvement. Velthar had always thought humans were junior partners who helped with small tasks. The truth was that humans had been essential to almost every major success of galactic civilization. She found a personal message from Ambassador Hyun-woo, recorded just before humanity's departure. In it, he explained what humans had really been trying to do during their centuries in the galaxy. "We came to the stars hoping to find our place among the great civilizations," Hyun-woo said. "We wanted to learn from species who had achieved, things we could only dream of, but we discovered something unexpected. The galaxy needed us as much as we needed it." The message continued. "We found species who were brilliant but could not work together. Civilizations with incredible technology but no wisdom about how to use it. Ancient empires with vast knowledge but no ability to share it peacefully. The galaxy was like a magnificent machine with all the right parts, but no one who knew how to make them work in harmony." Hyunwoo's face was sad but not angry as he spoke. So we became the missing piece. We learned to understand each species not just as they were, but as they could be. We became translators, not just of languages, but of hearts and minds. We became the bridge between worlds that had forgotten how to talk to each other. Velthar found another file containing a message from Dong Ho, humanity's former ambassador to the Rim worlds. His words cut through her like a blade. "We tried for 3 centuries to show the galaxy what cooperation could achieve," Dong Ho said. "We shared our greatest discoveries freely, hoping others would do the same. We served as mediators in countless conflicts, never asking for payment or recognition. We gave our lives to prevent wars that would have killed billions." His voice grew quieter. "But no matter what we accomplished, we remained the junior species. Our ideas were dismissed as primitive. Our methods were called emotional and unscientific. Our successes were credited to other species who had supervised our work." Dong Ho paused, looking directly into the camera. "We realized that our children deserved better than a lifetime of being second-class citizens in their own galaxy. So we decided to find them a place where their worth would never be questioned." The most painful discovery came in a research paper, written by Yoon Ji, the human philosopher whose work on collective transcendence had been dismissed as naive idealism. Reading it now, Velthar understood that it had been a roadmap for galactic unity that no one had bothered to follow. "Every species in the galaxy has unique gifts," Yoonji had written. "The Kalari have precision and beauty. The Vorthak have wisdom and patience. The Dravek have strength and courage. But gifts without cooperation are just unused potential." Yoonji described how humans had seen their role not as teachers or leaders, but as facilitators who could help. Each species contribute their best qualities to the common good. They had been trying to create a civilization where every being could reach their full potential. "Imagine," Yoonji had written, "a galaxy where Kalari precision guided Dravek strength toward Vorthak wisdom. Imagine what we could build together if we stopped competing and started cooperating. The stars themselves would not be enough to contain our achievements. But the galaxy had chosen competition over cooperation, tradition over innovation, and pride over progress." As Velthar read through the final files, she discovered the truth that would haunt her forever. Humanity had not left in anger or frustration. They had left because they had finally accepted that the galaxy would never change. In a document marked Final Assessment, human social scientists had analyzed the psychological patterns of every major galactic species. Their conclusion was devastating. Most galactic civilizations were trapped in cycles of thinking that prevented real growth or cooperation. "We have spent 3 centuries trying to teach the galaxy to see itself differently," the report concluded. "But some lessons cannot be taught to students who refuse to learn. It is time to find a classroom where our children can flourish." The last file contained sensor data that made Velthar's blood freeze. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures beyond the galactic rim. The readings were unlike anything in Council records, suggesting technology far beyond what humans had ever revealed. Humanity had not just left Council space, they had left the galaxy entirely, but they had not gone alone. The data showed that several other species had joined them, small civilizations that had been overlooked or dismissed by the major powers. Refugee populations who had been displaced by wars. Independent colonies that had grown tired of galactic politics. Humanity had taken the outcasts and the dreamers, the innovative and the hopeful. They had left behind a galaxy of ancient empires too proud to change and too powerful to be challenged. Velthar closed the files and sat in the darkness of the empty archives. Outside, she could hear the distant sounds of explosions as another skirmish erupted between former allies. The Great Council Station that had once been the symbol of galactic unity was now just another battlefield in an endless war. She thought about the humans she had known over the years, quiet, helpful people who had always been willing to work late to solve someone else's problems. Researchers who had shared their discoveries freely, even when they could have made fortunes by keeping them secret. Diplomats who had risked their lives to prevent conflicts between species who barely tolerated each other. They had been everything the galaxy claimed to value: peaceful, cooperative, innovative, and wise. But they had also been young and humble, qualities that the galaxy had mistaken for weakness. Now they were gone, building something new among the stars, while the galaxy they had tried to save tore itself apart. A communication alert chimed softly in the empty chamber. Velthar activated the screen, expecting another report of disaster from some dying world. Instead, she saw something that made her heart stop. It was a message from the edge of galactic space. The transmission was brief and simple, sent from an automated probe with human markings. The message contained just a few words, but they carried the weight of judgment. "We remember you as you were, not as you became. May you find peace in the choices you have made." The probe's sensors had recorded the galaxy's current state. The wars, the suffering, the collapse of everything humans had helped to build. It was a final report card on galactic civilization, and the grade was failure. As the message ended, Velthar realized that somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, humanity was still watching, still recording, still hoping that someday the students they had left behind might finally be ready to learn. But it was too late for her generation. Too late for her species. Too late for the galaxy that had chosen pride over wisdom and tradition, over growth. The humans were gone, and they had taken the future with them.